In the midst of social distancing and business lockdowns, a freelance writer and a graphic artist bought a bus, converted it into a tiny home on wheels, and moved out of our 4-bedroom house. 1 year later, we downsized to a Chevy Express. Now we travel between Texas and Pennsylvania from April through November while exploring small towns with rich histories. In the winter, we hunker down in Texas in our schoolie and dream of our next big trip.
We're Alan and Teresa.
And we're rolling with our nomies. We are in Madison, Georgia today, named after President James Madison, who was just elected when this town was settled. So he was a newly elected president, and the townspeople who came from neighboring states, South Carolina, and other parts of Georgia, and probably Virginia, and so surrounding states and other parts. Many of them were wealthy, and they were deeded land. At that time, Georgia had a land lottery where they gave out land to people based on chance. It was a lottery, and so if you won the lottery, you got some land. And some of those folks were deeded land here in this area, and they named it Madison. So we're going to walk around town, the historic district here, take a look at what we see, what we can find. And from what I've seen already, it's a beautiful, beautiful town. So I'm looking forward to this, and I hope that you'll enjoy it too. So follow us around. So we are looking at the Madison, Georgia Welcome Center, built in 1887. This was originally built to be a fire hall. And you can see the structure there. It kind of looks like it would have been a fire hall. It would have been an early fire hall, and it's got quite a history. It went through a fire and had some renovations and was rebuilt. But this is a beautiful structure, and it's got a lot of history. Built in 1887. Okay. So the Morgan County Courthouse was built in the early 20th century. It opened up in 1902, I believe. It was the year. There was a fountain out front, right there where the statue is, right in front of it. But that had to be removed for traffic safety reasons. And you know, there's some interesting details about the clock that was donated by somebody.
It was on the previous county courthouse, which used to be in the square.
Right, and it was donated by a local resident 10 years before it was used. And so interesting history there. Evidently the inside is just as beautiful as the outside. We're not going to go in. They give tours of the inside, but we're not going to do that today.
It was actually designed by an architectural firm out of Savannah.
Yeah, and they specialized in public buildings. So interesting that they specialized in public buildings in the early 20th century. Okay. And the Rose Cottage is next to it. So this is the Rogers House, and it's a example of the Piedmont Plain house form. Predates the neighboring courthouse by almost 100 years. Land in Morgan County at the time was distributed through the lottery system. You had to be a white male over 18, orphan or widow in order to receive land. And this lot here was purchased in 1809 by Reuben and Elizabeth Rogers, who built the house shortly after Madison's incorporation. In 1811, he sold the property for $1,000. 3 owners later, in 1817, Thomas Norris bought the house for $1,250. He served in the American Revolution as a private in the Maryland Regiment. He and his wife Sarah had 9 children. He died the following year, but Sarah lived here until her death in 1824. And then the Norris family added the 2 rear shed rooms in 1820. And then another man bought it in 1868, remodeled it in 1873, and added the decorative front porch and other details. Then he sold the house in 1886, and it was in the John Hunter family for 90 years. Now next to it is the Rose Cottage. It was built by Adeline Rose in 1891 in West Madison near the Georgia Railroad. right-of-way. The house was saved, moved, and restored to serve as an example of a working-class abode. Rose was born to enslaved parents in September 1864, 20 months after the Emancipation Proclamation and just over a year before Sherman's march to the sea effectively freed the enslaved who had not yet benefited from the proclamation. When she built the house, Rose was a widow with 2 children. She supported her family by taking in laundry at 50 cents a load. For a time, she washed and ironed for boarders at the Hardy House, owned by the mother of the famous comedic actor Oliver Hardy. The Rogers House and Rose Cottage are open daily for guided tours.
Yeah, we're going to skip the tour though. Lot number 6 was sold for $111 to Reuben Rogers.
$111. And he sold it for $1,000.
He sold it for $1,000. That was a pretty good return on his investment.
Yeah. All right, so we're standing in front of the home of Oliver Norvell Hardy, who is a part of the famous comedian duo Laurel and Hardy.
His home's no longer standing.
Well, it's no longer standing here, but I was going to get to that in a second. Now, I used to laugh my fool head off, as Grandma used to say, at Laurel and Hardy. They were a funny couple. And right here was the hotel.
Turnell Butler Hotel.
Yeah, Turnell Butler Hotel. It stood on this corner. And Oliver Hardy was born here in 1892.
He lived here.
Yeah, and he lived here in the hotel.
He was born in Harlem.
Oh, he was born in Harlem, Georgia, and then they moved here.
Yeah.
Right.
She opened a hotel in Madison named the Hardy House.
Oliver began his education at age 6 at the Madison Grammar School. So there you go, folks. Famous people from famous places. Courthouse.
Okay.
All right, so this is the original courthouse square in Madison. And it was originally, the first courthouse was a wooden building. Sat right here where the post office now sits. Construction began in 1810, completed in 1824. But it was torn down in 1837 and a new one built the following year. Of course, that burned just a few short years later in 1843. Now, the stately courthouse at the time was erected in 1845 after being burned, you know.
Right.
Built a new one. Despite having been survived Sherman's march to the sea and the Great Fire of 1869 that destroyed 42 other downtown buildings, the old courthouse burned in 1916. Less than 10 years after it had been outgrown and replaced by the current courthouse,
which is over there.
The beautiful one right there. And I'm sure the previous one didn't look anything like that.
Probably not.
Probably not as beautiful as that.
Right.
Even though they say it was stately. It might have been stately, but that's gorgeous. So the Dovecot House was built by Isaac Walker around 1830 for his daughter Cornelia and her husband Thomas Jefferson Birney. It was about 20 years after the founding of Madison. Archaeological digs have uncovered evidence of several buildings on the lot before this home was built, including a tavern. The story is told that during the 1869 fire that destroyed downtown, the house was saved by covering the roof and walls with wet carpets and blankets, keeping sparks from igniting the structure.
I can see that it could happen.
Yep. All right, this antebellum home was built around 1811. It's the headquarters of the Morgan County Historical Society, and it was probably built by Dr. William Johnston, who was a wealthy landowner in Morgan and surrounding counties. He sold the property in 1830 to Dr. Elijah Evans Jones, who expanded the house and gave it a Greek revival style. Dr. Jones was a prominent physician in Madison, began his career as a medical doctor at age 22 with only 1 year of medical school.
Okay. I hope it was a good year.
Madison Baptist built this red brick church in 1858 to replace their original wood frame structure located on Academy Street. The bricks were made by enslaved persons on the plantation of John Byne Walker, a wealthy church member and landowner. Every brick bears the imprint of the name Walker. The handsome memorial windows were added in 1906, and the neoclassical portico with Corinthian columns were added a little later as well. Legend has it that Union soldiers passing through Madison housed their horses in the basement. By the early 20th century, the congregation of the First Methodist had outgrown its Gothic building on Academy Street. Evidently, that's now an Episcopal church. A building campaign led to the 1914 construction of a fine new building, unlike any of the more traditional churches in town. The Akron plan featured a central auditorium surrounded by rooms for Sunday school and other functions. This Madison example features a classical Greek cross design with a sanctuary situated under a large dome and a smaller cupola-like dome on top of that. So this is called the Magnolias. It was made over in 1898, but likely built around 1839. Evidence of the original foundation, hand-hewn timbers, and walls can be seen from the cellar, and further indications were exposed during the current owner's 1990 remodeling. The front part of the guest house and back was most likely the detached kitchen of the 1839 house. So it was originally owned by John Robson, but in 1853, Dr. William Burr, a Philadelphia dentist who recently moved to Madison, purchased a house, and he added on to it. And then he married the niece of Joshua Hill, who was Madison's congressman and mayor and U.S. senator, evidently very famous. Widely told but unverified story that a tunnel existed from the cellar of the Pennsylvania Yankee dentist to the nearby Presbyterian church, which was then pastored by a man also of northern background, and it was used to hide runaway slaves.
That church is gorgeous as well.
Interestingly enough, they have stained glass windows on the side.
Yeah.
But the front windows are very plain.
They probably were stained glass originally. This is right next door to the Magnolias. You can see the stucco brick there on the exterior. It was completed in 1842. The original charter had an interesting clause which forbade any portion of the purchased land to be used as a burying ground.
Really?
You can see the Greek Revival architectural style, 3 entrance doors and a square belfry.
Yep.
The stained mahogany pews are divided down the center with a solid barrier originally separating the men who sat on one side from the women who sat on the other. The current stained glass windows were presented to the church by Miss Elizabeth Speed in memory of her family. So those were added later.
Yep.
Beautiful, gorgeous church. I tell you, the way it's designed, it could be a house.
It could be.
You know, it looks like it could be a house. Madison Morgan Cultural Center. It was restored in 1895 using a Romanesque revival building style. And in 1849, some famous dude here, George White, said Madison has long been celebrated for excellent schools. There's many well-educated gentlemen and ladies in Madison as in any portion of the state. So this was one of the very first graded schools in the southeast, evidently, and Georgia. Education at the time in Georgia had a dual education system known as separate but equal.
Okay.
So this is the Baldwin Ruffin Lanier House, and built in Greek Revival style. It's the only building remaining from the first of Madison's schools developed expressly to enable female students to pursue higher education. It was chartered in 1850 as the Madison Collegiate Institute and served as a finishing school for young white ladies. In 1851, it was renamed Georgia Female College. Originally designed as the classroom building, included several large rooms for receptions and assembly. Then it became the college president's home when a new brick classroom building was built next door.
Okay. Okay.
All right, the Hunter House has an interesting little love story attached to it. Built in the high Victorian style. It's about a young man, 20 years old, who fell in love with a girl who was only 12. He had to wait for her to grow up and go to finishing school. During those finishing years, he wrote to her faithfully, but all of his letters had to be read first by the head mistress to be sure nothing improper was written. Finally, the great day came when the young man could claim his bride, and they built this house together in 1885. Interestingly, Hunter's son, who inherited the house, waited even longer for his bride than his father had. He did not take a wife until he was 72.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness.
I'm glad I wasn't that guy.
You waited a while.
I did.
But I was worth the wait, right?
Yes, indeed.
Okay, so there is the front door, which we already showed you when we were telling you about this house. But this house just continues to give. The porches wrap all the way around it. Look out for this tree. Get you past the tree here.
This is called the Oak House, and built in 1898. It's one of the younger historic homes in Madison. Lee Trammell built this home for his wife and 3 children. And now there was an earlier home here owned by the Evans family. It was destroyed by fire, and after the fire, the only thing left remaining was the kitchen. And it was attached to the new Trammell house. When Union soldiers passed through Madison in late 1864, it's said that they stacked their cannons in the yard and decorated them with garlands of roses from the garden. Maybe they did, but it wouldn't have been for very long because the Yankees moved quickly through town. Now the front facade is said to be almost a duplicate of the earlier structure. It's in the Greek Revival style that you'd expect to see in the Old South during the Gone with the Wind days, you know what I mean? And the ceilings are very high inside. The rooms are 20 feet by 20 feet. The stairs are massive, and the halls are extra wide. And we just bumped into the listing agent. The house is for sale.
It does include a pool and a guest house in the back.
Yeah, and she said that the current owner spent $37 million
adding on
to the house in the back with, you know, decorations and all that kind of stuff.
Carpets,
so
and
they spent millions And the house is only listed for
2.6 something.
2.69 million or something like that.
Anyway, all the contact information for the listing agent is in the description below if you win the lottery or whatever. But the house is sat vacant for a number of years while for sale, but it's very well maintained. In fact, there's a new roof on this house.
And one interesting tidbit, the house has been used for filming in television shows like Vampire Diaries and its spin-off, The Originals.
Oh. Hey y'all, this is the back side of the Oaks house. And there is the pool house and guest house and the pool behind the pergola and the lattice work there. And then the multi-car garage back here. This is absolutely beautiful. And when they built the addition on the back, they did not add it to the front house. They put a breezeway between them. So for just over 2.6 million, it could all be yours.
Well, we're done here today in Madison, Georgia. Thanks for going along with us. Hope you see something here that you like. And remember, when you're going through Georgia, don't forget, stop in the small towns.
And check the description below for the realtor's contact information and also for the contact information for the Madison Morgan Visitor Center.
That's right, folks. We'll put all the right information, necessary information down below. Alright, if I don't do this right, then I'm going to be on the bad side of my wife. So y'all bear with me and pray for me. But while you're doing that, don't forget, share us with your friends, like us if you like us if you don't, subscribe to the channel. It helps us out. God bless.